Hi guys, this is going to be your second video for reading for the week of April the 13th. In the last lesson, we talked about how we can protect the earth, and we brainstormed different ideas of ways that we could preserve the earth on our diagram on the board. And so we talked about how important it is to save water, save electricity, keep the land clean, keep water clean, and keep our air clean. All of these examples help us to preserve our earth and our earth's resources. One of our vocabulary words last video was earth's resources, and we talked about anything that comes from the earth that is a natural resource that occurs naturally in nature. That is an earth's resource. And so it is very important that we preserve those and take care of them, because once we run out, there won't be any more left. So things that occur in nature, like our water, soil, rocks, minerals, our air, all of those things are part of our earth's resources, and it's very important that we take care of them. We talked about the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And in our story last time, we learned about the art project, and we talked about how the kids in the class had a problem, and their problem was they did not have any new materials to use for their art class. And so they had to be creative and come up with a way to make an art project out of what they had. So reusing and recycling their products that they had helped them to create a project, and they were able to turn it into the art contest. So we talked about how we have recycled in our classroom to make STEM projects, and how we've read about that and the importance of that in our story, Miss Rumphius, and how she talked about how it was important to make the earth a better place. And those were 3 very important words we studied then also: reduce, reuse, and recycle. That is a very important thing for us to do. So this week, I want us to focus on a new story. It's called The Woodcutter's Gift, and it's going to be on page 456 in our large reading book, if you want to turn there and follow along with me. This story tells us that it is a fiction story. Well, we know that fiction means that it is not true. It has imaginary characters and events. It includes a problem and a solution, and it often includes dialogue. In the last story we read, we talked about dialogue. We said that dialogue is conversation within a story. And you can notice that conversation because it is set off by quotation marks of the beginning of the words and at the end of the words. It is a person's exact words that they say in a story. So our story this week also contains dialogue. "That tree is dead. Let's get rid of it," remarked the storekeeper. "That tree is dead. Let's get rid of it" is set off by quotation marks. That tells me that was the storekeeper's exact words. And so that is dialogue. In a story, you can read about what people say and how they approach their problem and how they come up with a solution. And as we read, we can make predictions about what's going to happen next. A good reader puts their self in the character's shoes and thinks about what it would be like to be that character. If I put myself in the story and I imagine being that character, then I can think ahead and make decisions about what I think, or predictions about what I think those characters will say and what they will do. And that will help me to better understand the story. So as we read this story, The Woodcutter's Gift, I want you to be thinking about problem and solution. The first thing we're going to do is predict what we think the story is about. So let's be thinking, what do you think the story could be about? The Woodcutter's Gift. As I look through the story, let's take a picture walk and think about some of the pictures that we see along the way. I see a tree being cut and maybe used for different things. What are you thinking? Can you make a prediction about our story? How do you think this story fits in with preserving the earth? What are you thinking about how we can protect the earth based on this story? I'm sure the author has some ideas. I'm thinking about that tree, and I'm thinking that it's probably going to tell me some things that we could do with a tree and how to preserve the earth. Let's read The Woodcutter's Gift. And as I read, we're also going to be thinking about the problem and how we can solve the problem. So when I read, I want you to be thinking about what do you think the problem is, and then think about what the characters might do to solve their problem. Are you ready? The Woodcutter's Gift. On a stormy night, a violent thunderstorm blew in and knocked down the giant mesquite tree that stood in the town square. After the storm, all the neighbors, who rarely spoke to each other, came out of their houses and gathered around the enormous tree that was blocking the main street. That tree is dead. Let's get rid of it, remarked the storekeeper as he poked at it with his stick. He looked up to see what the others thought. The crowd muttered in agreement. Yeah, said the house painter. I'll bring my saw and cut it into little pieces. No, wait, the gardener said. Let's ask the woodcutter Thomas what he thinks we should do. Thomas, said the gardener, what should we do with this tree? This rough and ugly mesquite is only good for one thing, firewood, said the grumpy painter. No, the woodcutter said, moving closer to the tree. Don't destroy this good tree. So far, have you thought about what the problem is? What do you think the character's problem in this story is? Good. The tree. What are they going to do with it? They all have different ideas. So far, has anyone had a good idea about what to do with the tree? Not yet. So far, all they want to do is just get rid of it. Could you think of a better use for the tree instead of just getting rid of it? Couldn't we use a tree for anything else that would be helpful? I'm thinking about those words, reduce, reuse, and recycle, and I'm thinking that if I were going to be living in that city, I might want to come up with a useful purpose for that tree. Maybe we could make something useful out of the tree. Let's see what they do. What are you going to do with it? The crowd asked. The woodcutter paused, deep in thought. This tree could belong to everyone. How can only one tree belong to everyone? Not possible. The woodcutter just grinned and replied, It's a surprise. You'll see. The next day, the neighbors watched from a distance as the woodcutter split the tree into huge blocks. Then the men helped him haul the large pieces to his home. Day after day, the townspeople watched as wood chips flew into the air, little sparks from the fire, as the woodcutter carved and chipped and whittled the wood. My dad says that ugly mesquite is only good for barbecues, one young little boy said as he watched from the other side of the fence. Ah, but he's wrong, the woodcutter replied. The beauty of this tree is not on the outside, but on the inside. I think the woodcutter has a good vision. You know, a person with good vision can see things that other people can't see. He's thinking not about what the tree looks like now, but what the tree could be. Every day, the curious neighbors went to watch the woodcutter work. They talked and laughed and wondered what he was doing. "What are you making?" they kept asking him. "Be patient," he would say, and continue with his work. One day the woodcutter moved the chunks of wood inside his woodshed. Children peeked through the knotholes in the wood, but they couldn't see anything. The woodcutter worked every day until the sun went down, and every night he locked the shed. Why do you think he's locking the shed? I bet he wants it to be a surprise. Finally, the woodcutter rang the big rusty bell hanging on his porch. He had never done that before. Clang, clang, clang. Everyone rushed over and gathered outside the woodcutter's house. "What's happening? Why is the bell ringing?" they asked. "Follow me," the woodcutter said, and he led them to the woodshed. "Now, close your eyes and don't open them until I tell you." The big woodshed door swung open. Creak. What do you think he's made? "Open your eyes now," the woodcutter said with joy. The townspeople opened their eyes and gasped. "You see, I made a zoo for the children to enjoy," the woodcutter said proudly. Life-sized wooden animals stood before them inside the shed. "Wow! Yay! Hooray!" the children shouted as they jumped up and down with excitement. Do you remember when he was telling them that the tree could be used by everyone? They thought he was silly because it was only one tree. How can everyone use one tree? But the woodcutter was creative and he had a vision. He could think of a way to use that tree that everyone could enjoy. And he was able to make animals out of it for all the children. "This is a giraffe," squealed one little girl in delight as she stroked the giraffe's long neck. "And here's a zebra," said another little girl. "Look, a lion and a tiger," one boy said as he ran his hand across the lion's mane. "A turtle," a little girl cheered as she counted the squares on the turtle's shell. Even the painter couldn't believe his eyes. Thomas created a spectacular zoo from that dried up old mesquite tree. Everyone helped carry the animals one by one to the town square. "These animals still need a coat of paint," the woodcutter said. "They're not finished yet." "Can we paint them?" the children begged as they circled around the woodcutter. "Of course," he replied, scratching his head. "As soon as I get some paint." "Wait, we'll get the paint," said the neighbors, rushing home. They returned with an odd assortment of leftover paint and paintbrushes. You know, at the beginning of the story, do you remember what it said about the neighbors? No one ever come out of their houses and they didn't really talk to each other that much. They didn't have much to do with each other. They didn't want to make anything out of the wood. No one had any ideas. When the woodcutter made the animals and they saw what he had done, they were ready to help then, weren't they? They all ran home to grab their paint. You know, that's another problem that I'm noticing in the story. They wanted to paint the beautiful animals, but they didn't have any paint. This time, the neighbors chipped in and they were willing to help. So they ran home and got their leftover paint. What a way to reuse the paint they already had. Everyone gathered in the square to paint the animals. When they finally finished, they giggled at the orange giraffe with the brown spots, cherry red lips, and long black eyelashes, and bright blue hooves. They laughed at the turtle with the pink and green squares on its shell. They pointed to the yellow and purple stripes on the zebra. "I couldn't have done a better job myself," said the woodcutter, smiling. And to celebrate, the townspeople had a big party in the square. The adults watched the children play in the zoo. They painted brightly colored booths and decorated them with giant paper flowers in red, blue, green, yellow, and purple. Everyone enjoyed snow cones in rainbow colors. Seems like he brought the town together, didn't he? A few days later, men dressed in suits and ties came to talk to the woodcutter. The curious neighbors gathered outside his house. A short while later, the woodcutter came out and addressed the crowd. These gentlemen from the city want to buy the zoo for the museum. They say it's a work of art, he said, smiling sheepishly. Thomas had never thought of himself as an artist. Oh, what do you think they're going to do? They worked so hard to make those animals, and they all worked together to paint them, and they had them in the town square for the kids to enjoy. Do you think that they will sell them to the museum? What are you thinking? Everyone was quiet. Then a little boy asked sadly, "Does that mean we'll lose our zoo?" The children were ready to cry. Would their zoo be taken away? The woodcutter looked at the crowd. "Look at how our zoo has brought us all together," he told the men in suits. "The zoo belongs here. It's not for sale, but I will donate one piece to the museum so that others can enjoy it too." All the people cheered. The children jumped up and down. Everyone formed a circle around the woodcutter. They celebrated, they danced. That was a good idea, wasn't it? They kept their zoo for them to enjoy and donated only one piece. By the time it got dark, everyone was exhausted. That night, the children slept so soundly that they did not see Mr. Giraffe stretch his long neck and snap a leaf from the tree. They did not catch Mr. Lion's curly mane blowing gently in the breeze as he yawned. They missed seeing Mr. Zebra's purple and yellow stripes swirl as he pranced around in the yard. And no one saw Mr. Tiger's tail swished back and forth as he swatted a fly. No one saw the special magic that filled the air that night. They were just happy knowing the woodcutter's gift would still be there in the morning. In this story, we saw that the characters had a problem. The problem was they had this big tree that fell in the middle of their town and they didn't know what to do with it. On the beginning, nobody wanted to do anything with the tree. They just wanted to get rid of it. No one wanted to work together and make anything out of it or come up with a solution to help do something with it. The woodcutter had an idea. So he began making animals. But there was a problem. He would need some paint to paint the animals with. He continued making the animals. And then after he showed everyone what he had made, everyone was excited to help. They wanted to go home and get their own paint so that they could reuse what they had to make the animals more beautiful. You know, the woodcutter brought everyone together. They didn't paint the zebra and the animals the normal colors. Think about the zebra would normally be black and white. Why do you think they painted the zebra yellow and purple? That's right. Probably because that's the colors they had. Remember, they said they couldn't go buy more paint, so they had to use what they had. Everyone came together and donated their own paints. And I bet that's just the colors the kids picked. So they painted it yellow and purple. And it worked. And they loved it. You know, the woodcutter brought the town together. After they had not spoken and kept themselves, the project that he did with them helped bring the town closer. And the kids were able to enjoy it, and everyone else was too. I think that they came up with a good solution for their problem of the broken down tree. When you think about a story like this, think about how they were able to protect the earth. First of all, they didn't just destroy the tree. They used it for something. You know, anytime you can reuse something and make it into something else that's usable, it's a great idea. So they took the tree and they reused it to make these animals. He could have made anything. He could have made a chair or a swing or a table. Anything you can make out of something you already have is great. Another way that they protected the earth was they reused their paints from home. All the neighbors worked together to go home and get what they had, and they were able to paint the animals with what they had from home. This story also had dialogue. If you remember, it had their conversation. Dialogue is a character's exact words, and it's set off by quotation marks. You can usually identify the dialogue in a story by watching for the quotation marks. And we said this was also a fiction story. A fiction story has imaginary characters and events. It includes a problem and a solution, and it often includes dialogue. Why do you think the author wrote this story? Think about the author's purpose. I bet he wrote this story just to entertain us with a fun story. Remember, fiction stories, most of the time, are just for entertainment, just a good story to read. He could have been writing it to persuade us to reuse some things. Think about protecting the earth. This week, I want you to remember that it's important that we protect our earth. Think about all the things we've talked about with our 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And remember that those are ways that we can help save our planet. And I want you to continue writing in your journal this week. Maybe you want to write about what you would have done with the tree. What would you have done if you had found that tree? Could you have made something else out of it instead of the animals? Maybe you want to write a story about that. How would you reuse that tree? I'd love to hear your ideas. I'll see you next time. Bye.